All right, Paris is literally burning. Massive protests over pension reform going on in France right now. Police firing tear gas as France's high-speed rail halts. Eiffel Tower closes for a while. Planes couldn't get in or out of the entire country. Former foreign policy advisor under Margaret Thatcher, Nile Gardiner, with us on how France is dealing with all of this. What happened? How did it all go to hell so fast?
Well, Neil, thanks very much for having me on the show. Just back from London. Neil, I have to say that, yet again we see scenes of tremendous disruption on the streets of France. Emmanuel Macron is trying to push through very controversial, though much needed, pension reforms. And the reality is that the public sector unions in France are simply unwilling to make any concessions. And so you had about 1.5 million people on the streets of French cities yesterday, paralyzing the city centres of several major French cities. I think these protests are going to continue in the coming days. But the reality is that the economic situation in France is unsustainable. You have unemployment at nearly 9%. It's coming down very, very slowly. You also have huge unfunded pension liabilities. So, for example, France spends $8 billion a year funding the pensions of railway workers who retire at the age of 55 on average. And this is absolutely unsustainable. So Macron is actually right in this case to be pushing for pension reform, but he also needs to be at the same time pushing for further tax cuts, for free market reforms in order to kickstart the French economy. But I expect that you're going to see many more months of large-scale protests being driven by very left-wing public sector unions who are hugely resistant to any kind of change.
No, you're right about that. This is like the yellow vest thing all over again. Now, he caved on that, but it got me thinking, and it happens sometimes, Niall, that this is the same guy who was snickering at Donald Trump at the last gathering at NATO earlier in the week. And I'm wondering, a lot of these leaders who do that, including Justin Trudeau over Canada, they're hardly in a position to do that. The irony might be that this guy they're snickering at has a hell of a lot stronger economy and respective markets than any of these guys.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Neil. If you look at the strength of the U.S. economy, the United States is doing very, very well compared to all of the big European economies, including France. And the United States continues to lead on the world stage. And Emmanuel Macron continues to snipe from the sidelines. And the latest is, of course, that Emmanuel Macron wants to implement a digital services tax targeting U.S. companies, a classic example of protectionism. And so Emmanuel Macron talks about the need, for example, of free market reforms domestically in France, but he's also, at the same time, threatening very protectionist policies that are going to further undermine the French economy. So I think that Macron is often a very big hypocrite. And I think his leadership ability is sorely lacking at this time. And if you look at his approval rating, it hovers around 35 to 40%. But there's overwhelming disapproval for Macron in France. And I think he has an immensely difficult challenge ahead of him. But I can't say I'm very impressed with his leadership skills, both at home and abroad at the moment.
All right, we'll watch very closely, but it is another reminder now, to your point, that those who live in glass houses shouldn't snicker while they're throwing stones. Thank you, my friend. Have a good weekend.
Absolutely.